You're listening to the Pro Wrestling Post podcast with your host, Mark Madison. This episode's guest is Rhett Titus. Visit ProWrestlingPost.com for interviews, blogs, and upcoming events in your area. You can also find the podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, Google Play, Anchor, or whatever podcast app you prefer. And now, here's your host, Mark Madison.
Now, two ROH alumni are credited with training you in Austin Aries and Bryan Danielson. Looking back now, what could you attribute to learning from them at the time?
Austin Aries, we pretty much learned the basics and that sort of thing, and he showed me the ropes, all that good stuff. And then I got to do, as you can say, on the job training with Aries after that. When he managed me and Kenny, and I got to tag team with Aries a lot and do a lot of 6-man tags, which was kind of like the second part of my training with him. It was all on the fly and really good stuff. And as far as Bryan Danielson, he was his class was like the advanced class, so I learned a lot more like cooler holds, and he made me think outside the box a little bit more when it came to pro wrestling. And he also disciplined me a little bit more. Aries was kind of like me, a lot more laid back, and if you were a minute late, it wasn't really that big of a deal. But Bryan had it where if you weren't there by 5 o'clock on the dot, you were doing extra squats, extra push-ups, extra run the ropes, extra everything, and 9 times out of 10, coming from work straight to training, I was usually there at like 5:03, so I was always doing extra something. But it's good lesson learned.
Describe your experience during your program that you worked with Delirious, and maybe if you could have seen then something in him and how his role has changed with the company over the time.
Well, he was the active trainer at the ROH dojo at the time, so, I was still attending there as well. So, it was very good. And then it was actually a fluke of how it all happened because at the time, Gabe Sapolsky didn't really think very highly of me, and something happened where Adam Pearce had missed a flight, and, I basically got thrown in there with Silas Young, and, we had an awesome match, and, Gabe afterwards was very happy with it, and he told me so, and then, as usually happens in wrestling where, someone, misses something or someone can't do something, Human Tornado tore his ACL, and, he wasn't going to be able to do the angle with Delirious and Daisy Hayes, and that's kind of where I came along, and it was cool because, I would always get to work on stuff at the school with Delirious, Daisy Hayes, and, we got to do a lot of fun promos and vignettes and stuff, and it was just a blast because, that was like my first big angle and, first time where, I was getting used, and, it was a whole lot of fun. And nowadays, I still go to the ROH dojo, and, I was just up there last night training with Delirious, and, I still get to learn from him, and, kind of pick his brain a little bit too, and, as in his new role, he's got a whole lot more responsibility and stuff, but, it's just cool to try to listen in and, figure out why he does certain things and, where he goes with certain things, and it's just, all process of learning.
Well, part of that was, though, that I was wondering, because you're working a program with somebody, and they can communicate and things are working well, but is there any way that you look at him and say, this guy's going to be in charge, and not necessarily in a bad thing, but just like, would you have foreseen that, and just in the way he interacted with you initially?
No, I didn't, because at the time, I never really thought that Gabe would even get fired. Gabe was, in my eyes at the time, Gabe was a really big part of Ring of Honor. And then when Adam Pearce came along, I thought that was great too, because it was a change, and Adam Pearce was a friend of mine, and it was cool working under him. And I thought everything was okay. And then one day, I got word that it was going to be someone new in charge, and I was surprised that it was Delirious, and he's definitely excelled at the job, and over the years, he really done a great job, and I applaud him on that. I never expected it,
Yeah, fair enough. Wrestlers evolve and grow as performers, right? The more time you work, the better you get. Can you ever think of a time where playing a character maybe didn't put you in the best position to excel, or it was just a learning curve and you kind of take the bumps and you get a chance to roll with it and make the most out of it? Or
I kind of think that playing a character makes everything so much more easier,
Yeah.
Especially being like a young wrestler, when you're out there trying to find yourself, especially amongst Ring of Honor, like I was doing all these pre-show matches and dark matches, and, it was, being under 100 matches in your first few years of wrestling, you're out there in front of all these Ring of Honor crowds, you're out there trying to find yourself, and I wish from the get-go I would have had a character, but the character was actually kind of funny about how it came along. We used to get ribbed a lot by, all the older people in the locker room. During the pre-show, they kind of just, mess around. And Adam Pearce was doing the announcements one day, and, as I was walking to the ring, he announced me as the sexiest man alive. And I didn't ask him to do that. I didn't know he was going to do that, but I heard him say it, and I was like, all right, let's go with it. And, it was at Detroit WrestleMania weekend, and, the next show, I had a robe, the mirror, the whole 9 yards, and over time it evolved, but I think a character in wrestling makes everything for the better, makes things a lot more entertaining, makes things a lot more interesting, and I think how one character plays off of another character is a lot more interesting than how wrestler A plays off of wrestler B. But, that's just my personal opinion. That's my personal preference.
That's cool. Now, the All Night Express is reminiscent of the Express teams of the 80s and the 90s. Where did the idea for the team come about, and what initial success could you have envisioned for yourself and Kenny King?
Me and Kenny were teaming for quite a while, I want to say maybe like a year and a half, 2 years before we were actually dubbed the All Night Express. So we were just, Kenny King, Rhett Titus, undercard tag team, just out there, and Adam Pearce originally put us together. I remember when he emailed me about it, I was like, oh man, Kenny King, I hate that guy, I wasn't a fan of Kenny because, it was just one of his first shows in Ring of Honor. He really rubbed me the wrong way. I was getting ready for a pre-show match that just so happened to be on my birthday, and I was doing push-ups in the locker room before my match, and Gabe Sapolsky was looking at me like, oh my gosh, this guy's a machine. Look at all these push-ups he's doing, And Kenny King just walked by. He looked at me, and he looked at Gabe, and he's like, I don't even gotta do push-ups before I go out there. And Gabe was like, yeah, look at this schlep doing push-ups, and I was oh yeah, are you kidding me? So, from that point on, I kind of had a bad taste in my mouth with Kenny. But, and he kind of felt the same way about me, He was like, oh, man, I'm getting put with this student. This doesn't really make sense to me. This guy never really did anything. And we were both kind of like, whatever, and I was just like, you know what, this is what's put in front of me right now. I'm going to do my best to make it work and see where we go from here. And then, we just started gelling, and, we created a bond, created a friendship, and, our tag team started getting better. And then once Austin Aries was put as our manager, and we were dubbed the All Night Express, and we really felt like a tag team at that point. But, every good tag team needs a name, and, for the longest time we were trying to think of a name, and we just never really had anything. But to play off of Austin Aries' feud with Jim Cornette at the time, the All Night Express just seemed right, you know, because we go past midnight, we go all night, you know, just because we're that much better than the people that came before us. And, you know, I really dug it, and it was good stuff.
Are you looking for the newest and hottest in the world of pro wrestling? Then check out the amazing action on Powerslam.tv, the biggest indie pro wrestling channel in the world. Get over 6,000 hours of the best events from over 150 of your favorite promotions from 20 different countries around the globe. Brands like Progress Wrestling, Evolve Wrestling, Combat Zone, Defy, PCW Ultra, PWX, Over the Top, Shine, and hundreds of others with fresh content added every day for only $5.99 per month. Get your free trial today at Powerslam.tv.
When did the idea come about to reform All Night?
Well, we did do some indie shows like in North Carolina, like this past December, like last December, I guess. And you know, it was just cool, you know, being back. And let me think here. I guess things really started going to motion. I mean, with the TNA contracts, you know, it was kind of, yeah, they kind of, I don't know, they reformulated their contracts and they gave guys the option to get out. And, you know, I mean, after the whole Beatdown Clan thing happened with Kenny, you know, Kenny and MVP and all them guys, and they scrapped all the TV off, and Kenny was kind of left out in the dust and really had no direction there. And, you know, I mean, I had been exiled from Ring of Honor after the whole Scum thing, so, you know, we were just kind of both, you know, like, hey, you know, let's get the band back together. And it worked, you know. We've been wanting to do it for a while, but, you know, just wasn't the right place, wasn't the right time, and just so happened All-Star Extravaganza 7, it was the right place and it was the right time.
Well, that reaction from that live crowd, I mean, they popped as crazy as they could have, because to see you guys back and to make that connection, right? You're back, it's almost like you're home again. It really showed up, so kudos.
It felt really good too, because, you know, going into it, I was like, man, like, you know, we never wrestled in Texas before as a tag team, and, you know, it's been a while since, you know, the All Night Express was together. Are people going to remember? Is this a new crowd, you know, like, or is it the same fans? But, you know, coming out to get that reception, you know, it felt really good, and it was like, all right, it's back on, it's back and popping, so let's get it.
Now that All Night have been reformed, what are the long-term plans for the team, and possibly even for yourself if it doesn't work out on in the singles ranks?
I mean, first things first, I'm much more of a fan of tag team wrestling than singles wrestling. I kind of always viewed myself as a tag team specialist. Even as a kid, I always loved tag team wrestling, and, you know, I always viewed tag team wrestling as, like, you know, this great form of pro wrestling. And it's cool now, like, you know, watching the NXT special last night and how a lot of focus is put on tag team wrestling. And also, like, with Ring of Honor, I mean, tag team wrestling isn't just, you know, like a gimmick, you know, it's part of, you know, the entire company, whereas it's any given night, any one of those tag teams can go out there and be in the main event, and, you know, nobody would know the difference. And Ring of Honor takes the tag team division very seriously, and, you know, obviously the plan is to get the belts back that we never lost, the Ring of Honor World Tag Team titles, and have that reign with them like we should have, and, you know, just the sky's the limit from there.
No, not the end result. And so when I phrase this question, kind of bear with me, because when I say it, you're like, well, we were exiled, but that's not where I'm going with it. Describe your experience with the Scum faction, the storyline, how it came about. Were you pleased with the end result? I'm not talking necessarily about the exile part of it, but would you have done anything differently?
To be honest, like, I will always view Scum as probably one of my favorite things that I did in wrestling, just for the simple fact that, growing up, when I was, a teenager, Steve Corino was my man. He was my favorite. I was a, big Steve Corino fan. I used to email him all the time, bother the poor guy, whenever he was in the area, I always had to go see him. And to be managed by him was, one of the coolest things. Never mind the fact that, I was amongst all these other guys like Matt Hardy and Rhino and, Kevin Steen and Jimmy Jacobs and all these guys. And, I felt like it was like a very elite group, and I enjoyed it very much. I heard a lot of feedback from fans and stuff, and they weren't really. It didn't seem like they were really into it, but I mean, I had a great time with it, and I will always regard that as one of my favorite memories. Just being managed by Steve, and doing a lot of his old moveset, and it was like one of those big mark out moments,
Yeah.
So it was really cool for me personally. So I was very happy with it, and would I have changed any of it? No. I mean, I was a big fan of it. I liked it. Not everything is going to be up to people's taste, but I was a big fan of it.
That's awesome.
Are you looking for the newest and hottest in the world of pro wrestling? Then check out the amazing action on powerslam.tv, the biggest indie pro wrestling channel in the world. Get over 6,000 hours of the best events from over 150 of your favorite promotions from 20 different countries around the globe. Brands like Progress Wrestling, Evolve Wrestling, Combat Zone, Defy, PCW Ultra, PWX, Over the Top, Shine, and hundreds of others with fresh content added every day for only $5.99 per month. Get your free trial today at powerslam.tv.
So I had a question for you. You're a dad, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. I'm a dad too. Probably if I do anything in this world, it's probably the one thing I'm most proud of. But this is more wrestling related as being a dad. Do you ever feel when you go out there, you have to be guarded as far as the type of match you'll have, the kind of storyline you'll have? Not necessarily that your daughter or son will see it, but just knowing that that's what you go back home to?
The thing is, my son he's 10 years old now.
Yeah.
And he's very into wrestling, and, he's grown up with it his whole life. I mean, I had my son when I was 17. I was a very young dad, so I had my son before I even finished high school, before I even went to wrestling school. So It's something that he always grew up with, and, the way he looks at it is, he's just like, my dad, he's a goof sometimes, crazy, but this is what he does, and, he loves it, he's a big wrestling fan. I actually just took him to his first WWE house show the other week, and surprised him with that, so he had a blast there, but, the only time that I ever really had thoughts like that was like when the whole angle was going on where, Rhett Titus is a virgin, blah, blah, blah. Meanwhile, at the time, I had a 3-year-old son or whatnot, but, I just never wanted him to, look at that and think, what is my dad embarrassed of me or anything like that, which is never the case. And, but, he stays up with everything, he, follows everything on YouTube, but, not only do I want to be an example for, my son and a role model, someone that my son can look up to, not only am I thinking about that, but I'm thinking about other people's children as well, because, when I was a kid, I know that I looked up to wrestlers like they were, the most upright citizens and, everything that I wanted to be when I grew up, and, they were my heroes. Yeah. And, if a child feels that same way about me or somebody else, I want to be represented well, where that, their parents can be like, oh, okay, this guy isn't that bad of a guy after all,
No.
So a lot of that does come in mind, but, I always try to keep, all my social media stuff family friendly, and, try to not be seen in a bad light where somebody would be like, oh my goodness, like, who is this guy and, why is my son watching him?
Yeah. Well, the reason I had asked that question, because I think of, like, Noelle Foley is so, like, out there in social media, right? And so, like, so she was, I think, sitting front row when her dad's handcuffed and getting chair shot after chair shot after chair shot. And I don't know, like, if I'm in there, dad's going to be okay, but he's a bloody mess, right? So I'm like, how do I differentiate? But it sounds like you educate your son, though, too. You don't just, this is what it is, but you've made that other connection, too, right? So.
Yeah, thank God, wrestling has kind of gotten away from that sort of thing where, chair shots and blood and all that stuff is kind of passe now.
Yeah.
Because, a lot of that stuff was really, really violent, and it, hurt a lot of people long term, where, poor Mick Foley, I mean, sure, he's made a lot of money, but, that guy probably has, trouble getting out of bed every day. And now wrestling seems to be more getting back to the sport of things and more about, like, in-ring competition and actual wrestling than, the blood and the guts and all that sort of stuff. I mean, I've sure had my fair share of bloodbaths and all, but that was a different place and a different time, and knowing what everybody knows now about diseases and long-term effects of concussions and that sort of thing, the fans don't really expect it anymore, whereas years ago, to be honest, I went back and watched a few weeks ago, I watched the ladder war match between ANX and the Briscoes, and I was just horrified at the amount of blood. And, like, I was bleeding like crazy. Jay was bleeding like crazy. Mark was bleeding like crazy. It was violent. I was like, oh my goodness, like, and I actually had to ask myself, well, what the hell was I thinking, getting myself into this? And, the final image of Jay Briscoe laying in the ring with just blood, like, pouring off of his head and into a puddle on the mat, it honestly looked like something out of, like, some sort of horror movie. And I'm, oh my gosh, like, this is brutal. Like, this is, and, it was something that, at the time and place, I thought that's what I needed to do, but I think wrestling has changed for the better now, and, I'm quite happy about that.
What does the balance of 2015 and beyond hold in store for Rhett Titus, and what might be some of your personal aspirations moving forward?
Now that the Honor Express is backing up and running, just keep that going full throttle, stay healthy. That's always a big one, and also, get those Ring of Honor tag titles back, and get back into the same sort of spot that the All Night Express was in years ago. And also, me and Kenny were talking yesterday, and one of our big goals right now is New Japan, and trying to get to New Japan. Within the next year, I really hope that that's something that we can make happen.
And do you have anything to encourage, share, promote, make people aware of, as opposed to Rhett Titus?
You can always like me on Facebook, facebook.com/Rhett Titus, RhettTitus, or, follow me on Twitter and Instagram at Rhett Titus ANX, and, subscribe to me on YouTube, youtube.com/Rhett Titus.
Thank you so much for listening to the Pro Wrestling Post podcast with your host, Mark Madison. Once again, please visit ProWrestlingPost.com for interviews, blogs, and upcoming events in your area. And be sure to download the podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, Google Play, Anchor, or whatever podcast app you prefer.